Welcome to my talk about storing debian.org in Git LFS. So, what is Git large file storage? You install it like this. It's a way of storing large files in Git. So instead of storing the actual file, you store a SHA-256 checksum together with some cookie and the size. And instead of storing the actual file in the Git repository, they are put in a SHA-256 file form under .git. So it's quite nice that they are using SHA-256 and not SHA-1, but we're still limited by Git's native SHA-1 use. So in Debian we have a lot of archives. I'm not even sure these are the only ones. It took quite some time until I found a debug package repository. Someone pointed it me to. It's not widely mirrored, but at least the ftp.debian.org and the security.debian.org should be familiar to everyone. And these are well below 10 terabytes in total size, which you fit in your laptop these days. So I've imported these as Git LFS repositories, and they're available on GitLab and on GitHub. And these are imported continuously since half a year ago. So every change on one of these archives are hopefully within hours or even quicker mirrored in Git LFS. Archive some non-Debian apt archives too, like Ubuntu and Triskel, and some more. I consider importing some popular non-OS apt repositories like Docker or GitLab Runner for transparency and archiving reasons, but haven't done so yet. It's also Git LFS is quite nice since some of these derived distributions are to 99% identical to Debian or Ubuntu, and then the Git LFS object server won't need to store two copies. It will be basically the same. So how would you actually use this? So cloning these repositories is like normal Git clone. Of course, if you run Git LFS install with the defaults, it will download all the large files. So you will get a 2 terabyte download, which is probably not what you want. And Git LFS has this magic invocation method to skip smudge to not download a large file system, large files. And I suggest when working with this to make this default because it's easy to forget it. So the archive of ftp.debian.org is just a 500 megabyte Git archive. It's not that large, but still it takes 5 minutes to clone and check out, and that's mostly because of Git's heavy compression and it's lots of files. So how would you work with this? You clone it, you see that you pick out some file you want to look at, and I picked the in release file because that's the entry point for any Debian release, and it happens to be a symlink in most archives. And if you cat the actual file, you will get the checksum. So that's not very friendly to work with. I've set up, this is announcing this now. This is a server that's a public mirror of my internal Git LFS server. It's written in PHP, and then I kind of reveal how old I am, since no one is writing new stuff in PHP anymore. But that's for implementing the Git LFS protocol. I couldn't find any implementation that supported just exporting files quickly, and the protocol was simple enough to implement it. The machine is hosted at Hetzner. It's a 1 gigabps bandwidth machine, so it should handle some load, but maybe not everyone. So all of the objects in Debian, Ubuntu, and Triskel are there, and some more. So after the checkout, you would add this git config statement to specify the LFS server URL pointing to my machine, and then you can invoke the git LFS fetch to actually fetch some file. Git LFS generally has a quite weird user experience in my mind, but the fetch command just fetches files into your SHA-256 file form, which you can see there, and then you have to check out that file, and then it will check it out from the SHA-256 file form into your working directory, and then you can view the in-release file just as you would in a normal archive copy. And you can do this with any file in the archive, of course. And there are regexp expressions possible too. So why go through all this? What's the point of all this? That's a very good question. And the honest answer, I have two answers to this question. That the honest answer was that I was doing some reproducible builds, and I needed in-release files and the package files for basing my work on, and I put that in normal Git, and that Git repository grew quite large, around 10 gigabytes, and fetching that in a pipeline, it was okay network bandwidth wise because it was cached, but on some GitLab runner this exhausted the disk space. So for that reason, I put the release file and package files in Git LFS, and I was curious to see, okay, what's the scalability limits of Git LFS, because I didn't want to run into the same problem again, and so I imported Git or ftp.debian.org to Git LFS, and it was quite, it worked, which I kind of expected something to break, but it worked fine. But of course, so curiosity was the real answer, but we can attempt to rationalize this in some other way, to say that having data in Git is quite nice. It has some nice properties, and there are well-known tools to work with data in Git. You get native, good, strong integrity checking. You get signing of all the commits with whatever signature mechanism you prefer. And there are even from SigStore project transparency functionality to that signing, which is quite strong. There's a heavy work to protect Git. And I think this reuses all of that work. And also, you can think whatever you want of the GitLab, GitHub kind of centralized Git repositories, but it's what people look at as a best practice. So you can piggyback on that if you want. So another nice property is that you get a history. So basically, after a couple of months, this Git repository will become a snapshot mechanism. And of course, the Git repository will grow going forward, just like snapshot.debian.org. And my question here, this is an open question, so I'm looking for some thoughts on this, that how do you want to access the history of an apt archive? Currently, the mirror view is what I use to put current archive into Git and then do another Git commit when the archive changes. So you get a long sequence of Git commits for every change in the archive. But this makes it quite difficult to access if I want to pick out what file was available on a date 2 years ago. I can use the git log and git search commands, but it's not that accessible. The alternative is to change it to exploded view a la snapshot.debian.org to have all available versions available in the Git repository at the same time. Of course, this will increase the number of files significantly, but Git is quite good at handling a large set of files, so this may work. And there may be other ways of treating this too. Another open issue is how to, when importing this, it happens that the importer stops once in a while for any reason. It could be a network outage, power outage, or anything. So how to handle the data that is lost. This is a problem happening for snapshot.debian.org historically. And if you're using the exploded view, it's easy to add this to the Git repository. Just add another directory if you can find a copy of that data. With a mirror view, you have to kind of insert a git commit and then rebase everything after it, which becomes messy. And you really want parallel importers to work at the same time to be able to not miss any data. I haven't published this, but there are some experiments to have parallel importers put each copy into a separate branch, and then at least we get all the data. So this is an open question too. But I mentioned snapshot.debian.org. It's one of the repositories that's missing, and it's quite large, or it's larger than the others by some magnitude. So around 180 terabytes, 90 million files, which used to be a lot, but today you can buy 60 gigabyte SSDs put in your desktop machine. So this is 3 disks and you have it all. Of course, you may want redundancy. So I'm curious about the limits of Git LFS, so I wanted to throw snapshot.debian.org at Git LFS and see what explodes. This is currently work in progress. And first, thanks for the Snapshot team for creating Snapshot to begin with. It's an awesome facility to have all the archived packages in Debian. And also thanks to Claude Flare for having a CDN mirror so I can download it. I get around 50 megabytes per second, and that means 6 weeks of downloading time for entire archive. I've not yet finished downloading this actually. Started in March at the usual snapshot.debian.org, but it's quite aggressive rate limiting, so this is still churning. And I've been doing some experiments how large this Git repository will be. Not, of course, it will be 180 terabytes of data, but the .git subdirectory, and my estimate that this will be 50 gigabytes, and that's a quite heavy Git repository to work with, but there are similar sized or even larger projects out there, so multi-gigabyte Git repositories aren't that uncommon, but this is borderline where it becomes unusable. And of course, this is only the SHA-256 checksums of the entire files. Will it be usable to actually extract things from Git LFS server for all these files? It's an open question, but at least if this is done, you will have all the nice properties of Git with all the data in Debian. So, thank you. Do we have any questions? There's one. You have to make one up.
Were there any alternatives that you looked at, or was this basically, did it fit the bill, so you started going forward with this?
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. I mentioned that I'm not that impressed with the user experience from Git LFS, and I did use Git Annex many years ago, and I quite liked that. And the reason I picked Git LFS instead was basically that GitLab and GitHub supports it, which is a bit unfortunate. And I think GitLab used to support Git Annex, and I would have liked it more. I didn't try to put all the files into Git Annex and see how that would scale. It would be a nice experiment, but with GitLab and GitHub not supporting it now, becomes less relevant for me.
Other questions?
Oh, or we can wrap up.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.